Okay, so as I said, we're gonna build this little bendy bar along the bottom, or wherever you want to call it. Everybody with me at this point? Okay. This might require doing this a couple of times. I don't know. What I'm going to start with, though, is that it really, I'm saying that I have to think literally. And so I see this thing, it's starting off as a tube, and then flattening the tube, and then bending the tube. Okay? So, if I'm starting with a tube, what tool do I need? We're going to go to Create, and we're going to use the Disk tool. I want to line up along the x-axis, so I'll go ahead down here, right about here maybe, and click and drag, pull out. I don't know if this is the right diameter or not. And I'm going to start with something that's perfectly round. And then I'll pull it out. And if I pull Symmetry too, watch, if I pull this out, no, it's not going to do a thing. So let me turn Symmetry off. Let's move this back to the center. And let's pull it out. So it's about so. And we'll move this one over here. So this is about so. Okay. And again, I don't know if this is the right diameter. I don't know if it's the right length. Yeah.
Why? I'm just curious. Why you put everything in one layer instead of have a new layer?
Instead of multiple layers, because they're not overlapping. You're right. That would probably be a better habit to do that, and then put it back on there. I try to be consistent, but sometimes I'm not.
Okay.
If it's not overlapping the other one, it's not a big deal. When they do overlap, like the monitor in the crystal or the glass and that sort of thing, when they're touching one another, then I get concerned. But when they're separate entities, it doesn't bother me. It's easy to select them independent of one another. But as soon as separate shapes overlap other ones, or one is nested inside another one, sometimes it gets a little tricky. But since I said we should be doing this, let's go back and let's delete this. So let's go ahead and put it on another layer. Why not? I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway. So let's go ahead down here and make it in the same place. I want to make sure that the diameter is the same, or rather that it's perfectly round to start with. And I'm going to pull this out like so. Now, eventually I plan on bending this using a bend tool. In order to bend it, like the monitor, the screen on the monitor, in the back part here, I needed a lot of geometry, didn't I? I needed a lot of little polygons in order to create a pliable mesh to bend. I will need the same thing for the cylinder in order for it to bend. To do that, because you'll notice I have polygons along the x-axis, but I don't have any that go across the z-axis here. Right? There's no distribution of polygons here. It's just one big polygon on either side. So what I do now, under segments where it says 1, watch what happens when I use the spinner. See how it's adding additional segments along the bar? I'm going to crank this up to maybe 48. So I got a nice tight mesh, and that will allow me to bend it. Okay? Everybody with me? Huh?
Bottom is 260. Bottom 260.
The radius of the X is 260 millimeters. But again, yours might be different. You just go by the visuals. Okay. This should be about right. We'll see. I don't know if it is or it isn't. Just don't. Okay, so what I can do, and I have to think about this, it bulges a little bit in the middle, it bends at the ends, and it's also flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by flattening it. Before I'm finished with this, if I squish it like so, see how it already flattens it? So if we look at it in perspective view, see how it's already kind of flattened? It doesn't have to be perfectly round. I just start that way. I like starting with it and then I pretend, okay, I have a hammer, or I put it in a vise and I'm flattening it. I'm happy with it, so now I'm going to fix it. I turn off the disc tool. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off texture and wire and just view it like this. Okay, so you can see my flattened tube. Now I want it to bulge in the middle. And maybe I should have done this at the very beginning. We'll find out in a minute. There is a modification tool available to us to be able to bulge in the middle. And it's called the pole tool. So I'm going to select Modify. I'm going to come down here, and it should be under More. And I'm going to select the Pole tool. And I want the pole evenly tool, like so. I want it radial, or I could select linear. Now there's a bunch of different kinds of linears. I'm going to try linear, and you'll see why. Because I want it to bulge in the middle, don't I? Look at here, I can either bulge it at one end or the other. I can bulge it in the middle, or I can bulge it on either end. That's what these little widgets stand for. These control the fall off. Okay, so I want this one. I want it to bulge in the middle. And I don't want it to be a sharp bulge. I want it to be a nice, soft bulge. Now, I select under Mode, Selection, Action, Center, Selection, and I click and I do this. Watch what happens. It goes goofy, doesn't it, from the top view? It's going wonky. It's not doing what I want. If it doesn't do what you want, stop, hit Command Z and undo. Now, I'm going to try, instead from there, I'm going to try from one end. And now look what it does. See how it begins to bulge? Evenly, but it bulges in the middle and it leaves the ends intact. That's close, but that's no cigar. That's not what I want. It's doing the right thing, but I want to control it because I only want the bulge in the middle. I want the ends to remain flat. Having trouble? Let me do this, and then I'll stop, and then we're going to do it again, because I figured this takes time to get adjusted to this. I have a way of controlling the bulge. So what I'm going to do is right-click, and just like we used a little fall-off widget yesterday, this will do the same thing. I'm going to move to the top view, click, and drag. And notice that I have a little widget that controls the fall-off. So I'm going to right-click again, and I want it to end right about here and right about here. I want it to bulge only in the center, and that's it. I want the end to remain intact. this down like so. I'm right-clicking and dragging. I'm right-clicking and dragging until I get it in the center. Or centered, I should say. Is everybody following what I'm doing? Right-clicking and dragging to get that widget out. See the little blue line here? This is the area where it's going to be bulged, and it will leave this part alone. You can control that by right-clicking and dragging. But the way these widgets work, or the way this bulge works, is that I have to click and drag perpendicular to the direction of it. So that's why if I click from here, if I click from the top view, and I make it bulge, see how it bulges and it does weird things? If I try the perspective view, it does weird things too. It's just not bulging the way I want it. But if I select from the right or the left view, and I click and I drag, watch what happens. See how it bulges really nice? Just in the middle. Bulged there and nowhere else. Now maybe instead, I think what I would rather use under here is I want pull, just the pull tool, not pull evenly. And I'm going to do the same thing. I want linear. I want to bulge in the middle. I want it to be a nice, smooth bulge. And I'm going to right-click to pull out the widget. Right-click and drag, and then release to pull out the widget. Now watch what happens. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so I can see this a little better. Now if I left-click perpendicular now and I bulge, notice that it's bulging just the top. If I move the mouse forward, it bulges just the top and it leaves the sides alone. So this bulge tool, rather than even bulge, allows me to control what direction is affected. So now notice it only bulges in that direction, from the top to bottom. Let me go ahead and do the last one. I'm going to bend up the ends, and then I'm going to stop the videotape, and then I want, yeah, go ahead.
Can you move that?
How do you move it? Anytime you pull out a widget, you have to use the right mouse button, or you have to use command. If you don't have a 3-button mouse, you have to hold down the command key, and then you click and you drag. And that allows you to stretch a widget, to control the fall off. It's really like a weight map. It's controlling what areas are affected by the modification tool. And these are the different kinds of weights that you have. I want it to bulge in the middle, so this is the one that I selected. If I wanted to bulge at the ends, I would use this one. If I wanted to bulge at one end and leave the other end alone, I would use these. So these modification tools are pretty nifty. So let me bend the ends up, and then when I'm done, I'll stop the videotape, and then I will redo it, and maybe I'll just keep the videotape going, and that's what we focus on today, so everybody gets this, okay? So I'm done. You know, I have it bulged a little bit, and I'm happy with that. Now I want to bend these ends up so that the ends touch up here. So I'm going to use the bend tool. Now, without having all of this extra geometry in here, it would not bend. You need extra geometry to bend things smoothly and evenly. Okay. Again, notice with the bend, it gives us widgets. But we can only bend from one end to the other. It's not like the pole tool. I can only bend from one end to another, but I can turn symmetry on. So, what I'm going to do with the bend tool selected is from the center outward, I'm going to right click, because this controls the bend. You'll notice that at this end there will be no bend. At this end it will be completely bent. So if I right click again, I can move this over. I don't want it to be bent here. I want it to be fully bent here. But I don't want any bend from here to here. Okay? I'm going to align this nicely. And now what I'm going to do, so that I bend both sides, because watch what happens. Just like the last one, if I bend from either the top view, or the back view, or the perspective view, it's going to do weird things. I mean, it's bending that way. That's not how I want it bent. If I do it from the back view and I bend it, that's close. That's not too bad. But it's not bending the other side. A better one would be from here, because it's perpendicular, and now I bend it up. Notice how it bends very nicely. So I get it nice and perpendicular. I get a nice bend in here. But I want the other side bent as well. So I'm going to turn the symmetry on. Now watch. When I bend one side, they both bend. Now, this, I clearly have a slight problem here. And it's not a major one, but what do you think that problem is? It doesn't match up. This does not touch here. I made it too wide. Not the end of the world. We can always stretch it. We can resize it. We can make it small. It's not, and even though it's going to look like it's made of metal, when we're done, we can make it behave like it's rubber. We can stretch it. We can make it flexible any way we like. So this looks like a pretty good bend. It's the way I want it. It's nice and even. So see how I was able to flatten it? I started with a tube. I flattened it. Then I wanted to bulge a little bit in the middle, so I used something called the pole tool. And the pole, that's what the pole tool does. It allows you to bulge either from the center, in the center, or the ends, or on either end. It controls that. It makes it bloated. And in order to use these, I needed to add these tools. I need to add a lot of geometry. And now I want to bend. In order to bend it, I have to have a lot of geometry so that it flexes. In order to bend evenly on both sides, I made sure that symmetry was turned on so that when I bent one end, the other side would bend the same one. So I don't have to do it twice. And both of them are identical to one another. Okay. Now this may work, this may not. I may have to redo it. So I'm done with bending it. But I need to resize this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stretch. I'm going to do it from the center. And if I move it now, notice how it moves it in just a little bit. Just made it, resized it. Now I can move it in place. I can hit key for move and move it up. And I've got my little bent piece here. I should probably move it up a little bit more. So the symmetry's turned on. Back a little bit. Up. And I really blew it. Not really blew it. I shouldn't say that. This should have been longer, actually. So let me undo this a few times. And so let's go ahead and stretch these. Let's stretch this part out. I'm happy with this. I just need this to be a little longer. So what I can do is I can turn Symmetry on, and I can right, whoops, I don't want to move it. I right click to select all of these polygons. So just they are selected. Now I can stretch those and I can leave this intact. So this is the right length, but I need these to be longer. Remember, if nothing is selected, everything is selected. In this case, I only need these to be longer. So now again, I'm going to stretch, turn the Symmetry on, and I'll click from here, and let's pull it out. And that's not working. So I'm going to click from here, not from the center. See, I don't want it to stretch in like that. That's not how I want it to work. So let's change mode to Action Center Mouse. And I click on a drag, and now notice that it's stretching outward. So if it's not doing what you want, just stop and think about it. And say, okay, let me go back again. I'm going to go back to what I had selected before. I had Action Center Selection, middle of selection. And I have the stretch tool. And I select here because I want it to stretch outward. But if it says selection, center of selection, it's going to stretch from here, not from here. So now even though I click here and I move it, notice what it's doing. It's stretching from the middle outward. That's not what I want. So just stop, undo, say, okay, let me think about this. Right, I had mode selected, Action Center, center of selection. I want Action Center, center of mouse. So now if I move the mouse over this edge, right here, and I move it to the right, notice that it stretches from where my mouse is positioned. Now, is this enough? This is too much? I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm done stretching it. I turn it off. Deselect the polygons. I could subdivide this further if I wanted to add more joints, because let me see how smoothly this actually bends. I might have enough geometry, I may not, I don't know. So now I select the bend tool, and I'm going to go back to mode, Action Center Selection, and I will have Symmetry turned on. And I want it to bend from here out to here, don't I? I don't want the middle part to bend. I only want it to bend from here to here. I want to leave this straight. So to control the bend, I move at the point where I want to start the bend, and I right-click and drag to pull out my widget. And then if I want to center it up, I right-click and I move it just ever so slightly. So where it's the broadest here, that means that it will bend 100%. At this point, it won't bend hardly at all. That's what this little widget means. It's a fall. And then I have to decide, well, which quadrant do I use to bend this? Let's try the top view. And I click and I drag. Well, it's bending in the wrong direction. That doesn't work. Just stop, let go of the mouse, undo. Okay, that didn't work. Let me try the back view. Hey, that looks pretty good. That's not too bad. It's not exactly what I want, but it's not bad. Let me also try the right view. I'm going to click it up like so, and move it, and it's bending pretty nicely. Okay? And again, I'm going to have to shrink it. I'm going to have to make it a little bit squishier. So I'm just going to make the whole thing smaller. To do that, I'm done bending it. I'm going to use stretch, and I'm going to click from the middle. I'm going to pull it in until it matches. So now it's stretching here. It's not doing exactly what I want. It's changing the distribution of the polygons, and I don't like that. So what I need to do, I'm going to turn off symmetry. If you want to re-stretch it from here, it still shrinks it. But the distribution of the polygons is pretty much the same. It's equal. How do I know that? Sometimes you just think about it and go, well, wait a minute, you're stretching the polygons and the distribution of them is unequal now. So maybe that has to do with symmetry. And it did. I lucked out. Now I can move this. I can hit T for move. I can move this back a little bit. So, and I can move it up. So it fits in place. So, and it still is a little off. Let me look in here and see what it is. No, it's just perfect. I lucked that. But just enough clearance so it doesn't affect the monitor. Okay. I'm going to stop the video. Well, you tell me. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody watch these videos at all? A little bit? Do they help a little? Okay. They're help review? That's all they're intended for, review. Let me go to another layer, and let's try this again. And then I will go slower, and then you guys follow along with me and stop me along the way. Say, whoa, stop. Or say, please review that again. Why are you doing that? I'm trying to explain as I go. It may not make sense to me, but not to you. I'm trying to think aloud is what I'm trying to do. It's no different than, well, has anybody watched public TV, PBS, Yankee Workshop, whatever? Ever watch that guy? Norm Abrams? He's got a workshop, and he's got every tool in the world. The guy's got to have $1 million worth of tools in this shed outside. I mean, it's a beautiful workshop behind his place in Maine or wherever it is in Vermont. And he builds old furniture, replicates. He's got a tool for it. Well, when you go in there, I mean, I'm sure, well, each tool has a very specific purpose. Any number of tools would work for what he wants to do. You could use a handsaw. You could use a radial arm saw. You could use a table saw. They'll all cut a piece of wood in half, but maybe one would work better than another. Depending on your skill level, probably any one of them would work. So that's what we're doing here. I'm trying to think aloud. I'm looking at the end piece, the end product, and trying to look at it and say, well, what is that when we started off? And so instead of wood, we're dealing with metal. I see this as a metal pipe. And then that metal pipe was flattened, so now it's kind of an oval. Now that it's an oval, I need it to bulge in the middle. So what tools do I have available to me to bulge it? And then once that's bulged, then, okay, I need to bend these up. So you would put it in a vise, and you do it with a hammer, or you do whatever. There's tools available in metal shops that actually allow you to bend a pipe. So that's how I'm thinking about it. But then how you use those tools is tricky, because now we have to look at each angle and decide, well, do I want it symmetrical? Do I want it only bend at one end? If I click on this quadrant and bend, is it going to bend the way that I want it, or do I need to click on another quadrant? It gets very confusing. And I know all of you are confused. Trust me, when I started learning this, and believe me, I'm no expert. I'm teaching it, but I know I'm not compared to some of the guys that model, that do this 80 hours a week. You know, I'm like this compared to them. So it's, when I was first learning it, I thought because I knew Photoshop, I knew Illustrator, I knew all these programs, it was going to be a slam dunk. And it was very different. Because now you're working in 3 dimensions, you're not working in this 2. So it was a whole other mindset. And suddenly, in the middle of the semester, I was taking this class during the summer, there was an epiphany. You know, it's like, I get it. I throw away all my knowledge from Photoshop and stuff, because it sort of applies, but it doesn't. You know, for me to make sense of it, I'm in a wood shop, I'm in a metal shop, and these are the tools that allow me to manipulate and to create these objects and to do with them what I need to do. And then if I thought of it in those terms, it all made sense to me, and I could make what I needed to make. So that's my recommendation, is throw away your knowledge of Illustrator and Photoshop and stuff, other than click, right click, double click, click and drag, you know, I mean, those basic computer skills. The rest of it, it's easier if you were to take a wood shop class or a metal shop. Say, okay, I need this tool to bend it. Well, what tool do I have in here that will bend it? Yeah. So let's I'm going to click here and click on the bottom and up here. So I'm going to start over again. I'm not going to get rid of this. I'm happy. I like that. That looks really good. So I'm not going to get rid of that. Now I'm going to hit Command S to save it, so that I have this saved. Okay. So the first thing that I need to do, everybody with me? Can I start to try to build it with me? Yes.
The problem is,
Wait. Go ahead. Okay, that's because Symmetry's turned off. Turn off Symmetry, and now undo it. Go undo. Go back again, maybe. And now stretch with Symmetry turned off. And from the center of selection, and then from here, if you click stretch, it should just stretch out. Like so.
but it's like this one's longer than that one.
Okay, then maybe you have more. It's probably because this isn't aligned along that axis that I talked about. Okay, see the back view. This deselect everything and then hit F2, and what that will do is it will center everything up in the middle of your universe. Remember, that's the first thing that you have to do for Symmetry to work. Okay. Yeah. You may have to turn off the video recorder for a minute, and I'll come back to it. Okay, the question is, what's the difference between size and stretch? And the answer is that with most of the modification tools, there's 2 versions of each. So, for example, if let's go ahead and let's make a disk for our project here. I start from the center, and I pull it out like so. And I pull it out like so. And I want to reset this for a minute. I don't want to, I want to show you what happens without all of these segments. And I'm happy with that. And now I say to myself, you know what? I need to resize this. If I use the size tool, depending on which mode is selected, it uniformly changes the object along the x, y, and z coordinates. Okay? So if I select action center, center of selection, and I resize it, watch what happens. And I make it, the whole thing gets smaller, or the whole thing gets bigger. Right? That's what size is. Stretch, on the other hand, allows me to control which of the x, y, and z coordinates are changed. So, for example, if I had forgotten to flatten this, and I wanted to flatten it now, I can do that. But if I use size, that doesn't work. I can use stretch, though. So instead now I can use stretch, and I can click from this end and watch. If I pull the mouse back, notice it allows me to flatten it. I'm only changing those dimensions, and I'm not changing the length. Now, also notice what I've done. I forgot to add those segments. So if I wanted to try to add a bulge, if I wanted to try to bend this, it won't work. You know, think of this, think of adding segments as having joints in your finger. If there are no joints, you can only do this. But with the joints, I can bend my finger. Not as smooth as I'm trying to bend this, but think about it. If I were like a centipede or something like that, you know, there's tons of joints here, you can get a nice smooth curve over here. It'd be kind of wonky, but you get the idea. So think about it. If you don't need to bend it, if you don't need to modify it, you just need a straight pipe. Don't add all those segments, because that means that that's that much more geometry that your model has that it doesn't need. It will take longer for that to render later on when we send it over to layout, when we apply a unique surface to it, and when we set it up so that it looks like chrome or whatever, and it goes to render it. It will look the same, but it's way less efficient. And especially for those of you who are interested in building models for games, the whole goal of that is to make something look pretty decent, but to cut way back on the number of polygons that we use. Way back. For film, it's a different animal. They want stuff to look perfect, and if it takes 40 hours to render a frame, then that's the way it goes. So now watch what happens when I try to bend this, and you'll see. And if you get this result, either with the pole, and the pole is the same thing. Notice that we have pole evenly, that bloats it evenly, or the pole tool allows me to control it, the direction of the bloatedness of that I get. So just like we have stretch is the counter to size, we have pole evenly and pole, and there are some other ones too that are around here. Taper constrained. You know, I mean, it depends. Do you want to taper it evenly throughout, or do you want to only taper 2 of the dimensions rather than all 3? Does that make sense? So that's what each of these modification tools have. They typically have 2 versions of each. One is uniformly affected. The object is uniformly affected, X, Y, and Z, the 3 dimensions, or the other version allows you to constrain 2 of them, or 1 of the dimensions. So if I try to bend this now, and again, let's try the top view. Oh my, I really distorted this thing. I'm moving this forwards, backwards, left, right, and it's bending, but it's doing some pretty wonky stuff. Just Command-Z, undo. Again, think about the mode, action center, center of selection. Let's try the back view. Again, similar. It's really distorting this in a way that I hadn't anticipated. Try perspective view. Again, it's just moving it around. It's not really. It seems like it's bending it. If I move perpendicular to the direction I want to bend, and now I click on the drag, it's bending it, but not in a way that I had anticipated because there are no joints. Look how it is flattening, And also look how the end caps also, they're the only things that are really changing. They're kind of tapered in a little bit now, whereas they weren't before. They were perpendicular. See how it's slanted now? That's what's bending, just that. So how do I, Command Z, why aren't you working? You know what? Oh, looks like the whole thing cracked. I'm glad I saved it. Right with me. Okay. Well, then let's quit. Force quit. We're going to do that. Okay, we better restart the computer. All this is on tape, so be sure and watch it. Now, when I put in 48 segments, how did I know to use 48? It looked like a nice tight mesh that would work. If you can get away with fewer segments, then by all means. Oh, here's a stall. Okay, once again, computer rebooted. Let's try this again. So, reboot. Anybody see that show?
Yeah, that
show.
show.
I thought it was one of the first, I think it was the first regular computer generated, CG series. I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was good, and it was really, so the characters weren't really sophisticated, but I thought it was really pretty neat. Anywho, create. We're going to use the disk tool, and I'm going to click here to make it about 30, and let's pull it out. So it's about here. I'm pulling it a little bit larger this time. Make it a little bit larger than what I need it. Okay? Now, I can either do this now or later, doesn't matter. I need to add segments because I know I'm going to use the fold tool and I'm going to bend it. How many segments? I don't know, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the spinner. And I'm going to start to move the mouse to the right until I get a nice mesh of this. And I think, and again from past experience, that if I go all the way up to about 48, it's a pretty tight mesh. It will give me enough geometry to be able to bend it and flex it as I need it, as I need to. Okay? And now I can also flatten it because I haven't finished that part yet. I can either do that now, or if I fix it in space. Remember a moment ago I said that I could use the stretch tool, and that would allow me to flatten the the pipe as well, so it becomes elliptical rather than the circular. Okay, so I'll come in and I'll zoom in from the side view, and I will stretch it like so. So it looks nice and flat. So I've done the first thing. I've built the pipe, and I flattened it, and I've added geometry to it so that I can bend it later on. Okay? Fix it in space. I could do one of two things. I could either bend it now, or I can apply the bulge now. I decided to do the bulge now and bend it later. Now, how do I know to use the pole tool for the bulge? Because I know the tools. And I'm just, as we're building this, I'm introducing new tools to you. So we want to modify this existing shape. I want to put a bulge in this, so I'm going to use, under modify, I'm going to use a pole. And that's found under more. Pole tool, P-O-L-E. Make sure that your numeric requester is up. If it is not, you will not see these settings that allow me to control the fall-off. The fall-off is important because if they serve as weight maps, I can control what part of the object is going to be affected by this tool. And to do that, I use the right mouse click to drag out the little blue widget that controls the weighted part of that tool. So I want to make sure that this is nice and curved, like so. I want a nice, smooth, even distortion. How much of this do I want distorted? I only want it distorted from here to here, don't I? I don't want it distorted all the way to the end. If I did, I don't need the weight map. But I want to make sure, because right now it's set to radial, and that's wrong. I want it linear. How do I know that? Because I blew it. I just realized that I was going down the wrong road. Because notice I want it bloated in the middle here. Nice and round. I want it affected in the middle. If I want it in the end, let's click this and watch what happens when I use this. Okay, now watch what happens without any weight here. And I click from the end and I affect it. See how it's bending it from the end and bloating it? But what if that's the shape that you wanted? You know, it's a great tool for that. Most of these are pretty versatile. And you would be surprised with some of the shapes that we're going to make. You would never expect that you would start with the ones that we do. And when you use a number of these tools and everything is done, it's like, my gosh, how did you ever get this from this? You know? But instead, I want this one because I want it bloated in the middle. And I want a nice smooth. If I don't control this and I move it, watch what happens. It changes it, but notice how it's pinched in the middle. But maybe that's what I want. I don't want it nice and smooth. I want it pinched like this. Notice how it's a little bit different than what I had done before. And that has to do with this. Now, the reason I'm using pole and not pole evenly is because I only want it bloated top and bottom. I don't want it bloated to the sides. So by clicking on this perpendicular, and also, now watch, if I click here and I move it up, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I accidentally deselected the pole tool. I didn't want to do that. There we go. Now watch, if I click from here and I bulge it, the whole thing is bulging evenly from end to middle to end. I only said I wanted it affected in here, so I need to use a weight map. So let's go ahead and right-click and bring that weight map out. Pull it out to here, right-click, and pull it out to here. And right-click here to make sure that this is centered. And right-click here to make sure that this is centered. I want to make sure that it's in the middle, centered in the middle of my pipe. from the end. Now when I push up, notice what it's doing. It's bulging only in that area, in that middle. It's leaving everything else alone. And it's only pushing it up. It's not pushing it out because I'm pushing the mouse forward. If I had pull evenly, it would be loading it in both directions, in all directions. I'm only pushing it up and down. I'm only loading it up and down. Now I'm ready to bend it. Has everybody gotten this far? Or do you feel comfortable with it? Give it a try. Let me just sit and wait until you get this part. Feel comfortable with this part. And then when I'm done with this, then we are on the same page. That's all we'll cover today. And then you guys try to continue to build. At least get this part built. And then look at some other parts. There's some spheres that need to be added. If you want to, try to build the arms. Think about what tools you would use for that.
Switching the objects.
So to bend this, one of the things that I've noticed is with several of you who are having problems, and I need to make sure we're working the right way, that this is really the standard layout for a quad setup. Top is in your upper left-hand corner, front or back is in your lower left, perspective is your upper right, and then right is here. You can also use left, but it's usually the right view. Okay? As I said, it's really important that if you're going to use symmetry, that it's done here in the front or back view, because your x-axis runs horizontal, and whatever is to the right of the y-axis, which is this one, the vertical one, has to be identical to what's on the left for symmetry to work. So when I'm looking at this, and if I see this as right view over here, I don't even pay attention to that. I'm assuming that your setup is identical to mine. And that's how things can get turned around. Okay, so I've got the bulge in my pipe. Now I'm ready to bend up both of the ends. And if I have this set up right, then I can use symmetry. I only have to bend one side, and the other side automatically bends in an identical fashion to this one. So I will zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to use the bend tool. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the little widget selected. And it doesn't matter which one of these is selected. But in order to control the bend, I only want it to bend from this point, right at the end of my bulge, to the end of the piece. Done. So to pull out the little weight widget, I right-click or command-click and pull it out from here to here. And make sure that this is all centered up. Notice from the top view, it's over to the left a little bit. If I want the bend to be evenly distributed, make sure that it's lined up in the middle of your object. So I right-click again on each end to make sure that this is lined up nicely. Then, to bend it, I move to the right view because the right view is perpendicular to the bend. I want this to bend upwards, so I move over here to the perpendicular view, and I click, and I drag, and I bend the one up, and nothing happens to the right. Why is that? So I don't have symmetry turned on. So I undo, turn symmetry on, I flip and I drag, and now they both move up. nice and evenly. And that's what I want. It's nice and evenly distributed. Okay, I'm done bending it, but I have another slight problem. This is too wide now. I need to shrink this down. So let's turn symmetry off. Let's go ahead and select stretch. And again, if I have mode from center of selection, when I stretch this, it doesn't matter where the mouse is. When I move my mouse to the left or to the right, notice that it stretches it evenly, almost like symmetry is turned on from the center of my selection. Can you get it reduced down a little bit? If I wanted to shorten these, I could have shortened this as well. Hit T for move. I can move this up so that it's up. And also redistribute it, so this is so. Okay? Everybody getting this to work? Okay, so what I would like you to do, since it's almost 11, we have a little bit less than an hour left. Rather than me demonstrate more, what I would like you to do is go ahead, and some of you have already added the little antenna. Add the little ball here. We're going to start to build the arms. There's a little ball that's down here. So add those. And I want you on your own to try to figure out how to build the arms, because that's what we'll build next. After these little ball joints here and here. And then this is going to be harder. We're going to build the leg. The arms should be much easier. But look at it. Again, we start with basic pipes. I'll give you a hint. You need 2 cylinders, one for the forearm and one for the, what's the other arm? You have the forearm and your upper arm, okay. For the upper arm, you're going to use the taper tool to get it to shrink at one end and the other one not. To get the, the Popeye muscles here, as well as this, you're probably going to use the hole tool to get this to bulge a little bit here and a little bit here. And rather than try to follow this model here, where the arms are all bent, what we're going to do, as I said, like the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo Da Vinci's guy, build them straight out. Because if you're going to, sometime in the future, if you plan on animating them, and you want to put bones inside them, that's the easiest way to do it, just to have the arms directly outstretched. And then you can put the bones in it, and once the bones are in it, then you can bend it any way you want it. But don't pose it now. Pose it after you add bones. So leave it outstretched, and then you will make the legs straight and low. Okay? See if you can do that. And if you can't, that's okay. I want you to tinker with it. Feel comfortable with what we've done so far today, just to bend that bottom part. Build the little ball joints, and then that I know you can do. And then see if you can build arms on your own. See what you can do. And also look at proportions. Look at the relationship between the sizes of each of these parts, and try to make them as you see them here in the image. It's not going to be identical. It's not going to be perfect. But that's okay. We're close. Okay? Yeah, let me go ahead and turn the videotape off.